We have had 3 webinars already focusing on how to survive this crisis and the importance of digital strategies in this. I'm very glad that we have been able to do this in a partnership with CheckMyBus. And it's the CEO of CheckMyBus, Marc Hoffman, who's going to make the keynote on the operational side of today's discussion. Later, we'll come to the second keynote on the financial part, which will be done by a representative of Deloitte. Marc, can I give you the floor?
Thank you, Jan. Thanks everyone for joining to the webinar. So I have actually the honor to set the ground for the discussion, which will happen later and which will hopefully be a very vivid discussion. A few words on CheckMyBus. For those that don't know us, we are leading global meta search for intercity bus and airport bus. Our mission is actually to make bus mobility as simple as possible. And for me, this has a lot to do with visibility. So making buses visible to a global audience for travel purposes, but also, of course, for general mobility purposes. We work with OTAs, we work with GDSs, but of course, we also work with partners directly. So a benefit of working with us directly is that a partner can control the brand. We don't see online distribution as an either or topic. So I think it makes sense to work with all different options which are available on the market and which are profitable to get an as much broad distribution as possible. For the reason actually with a good mix, I believe that surviving today is much easier and also growing tomorrow will be much easier, which is actually the topic of my presentation. Hannes, please, next slide. Survival, and I don't think I have to talk much about it. Jan said it already in the beginning. We are all struck by this crisis. So COVID has been hard for everyone and is still hard for everyone. This March, basically almost all traffic got down. Then we saw in summertime some recovery in Europe. We reported on that. So users were actually coming back relatively fast, which was positive. But then, of course, the second wave kicked in. And Europe got back into lockdowns, now coming out again, coming back again into lockdowns. And the likelihood that this will basically end before Christmas, I think, is very low. So probably next spring will be a good date. On the other side, in Latin America, things are getting better again. Hopefully that stays for a while. So traffic is ramping up there in different countries. So basically, it's a little bit like a roller coaster, one could say. Everyone knows that, everyone is affected in this audience. What I also see and what I'm really, I could say, depressed about, that on a global level, we have seen very little government support on the bus industry, while in other areas of mobility, we have seen much more support with train companies as an example, or airlines as an example. And that, of course, doesn't make it easier for buses actually to get through this crisis. What we also see is a shift in behavior of users. I mean, we see the channel movement from offline to online. We see also different behavior patterns in general. While this move from offline to online is, of course, a challenge, on the other hand, it's also a big opportunity. And that brings me to the other side of it. And please see this only as a summary. I dive deeper into some of the other topics. I have never seen a moment where the bus business was starting to think so much about digitalization, about new projects that are possible. And you could say there is something good in this crisis. I think that's a difficult statement, I know that. But it forces everyone to focus, to rethink what we are doing and what we could do in the future. Users want more digital, and bus companies are actually opening them up on new possibilities. And that, again, will allow growth in the future. It's the fundament for growth in the future. Looking a little bit further down the road, once COVID is in a better situation, the mega trends, they will still remain valid. We still need to shift private mobility to shared mobility. So this will not go away. And the opportunity which we see happening in some areas is that crisis allows to rethink mobility. And that might be a sustainable benefit for the future. Hannes, please, next slide. As Jan said, we've gone through a very exciting series of webinar with very interesting speeches, and thanks to all speakers that have been there before presenting their studies, their best cases. Most of it were operators, some experts from the industry sharing their knowledge to the global audience. I just picked a few of these areas just from a bird's perspective, because these were actually solutions that were taken to survive today. These were solutions that are happening today and helping today. As an example, National Express had to restart the network, like many others, of course, too. And they said, come on, let's rebuild it smarter. Let's rebuild it more flexible. Let's rebuild it on technology and not as we have done it before. With Mobility RDO or Marino Bus, we had speakers who invested in customer understanding. Mobility RDO set up a complete digital transformation process through the whole company, trying to get a user-centric way of working on the customers and being successful. We saw with Grupo Flecha Maria, also from Mexico, how technologies can be used to make bus operations more efficient and also more profitable, even in these difficult times. And that is surely something that will stay after the crisis is over. We had speakers talking about dynamic pricing, which was a concept that is not widely used necessarily in the bus industry, but has reached a lot of interest and will surely be seen much more in the future. We got companies who actually took the crisis as an opportunity for new business, with Silo, for example, and we see this also with BusUp on worker transportation or employee transportation. Also, Flipco presented a concept from door to door, actually expanding the value chain, which was very interested. And the University of Milano presented a study on intermodal, which is surely a future possibility. We had partners there talking about digital service to handle COVID better, to be more flexible, and maybe to be a pay as you earn and not have high upfront investments. We had WU with Turnit and the Colorado Department of Transportation together with Betteres on that. And last but not least, we had a case where a company said, I'll invest in the e-commerce setup even in that time, and it pays off fast. So that's for today, but of course, it's also interesting to look for the future. Hannes, please. And if I look at the timeline, what we expect to happen, and of course, I'm sure in the discussion, there will be a lot of topics, discussions about what will be the truth. I think there's no one truth on that, but that's how we see actually the future to a certain extent. The lower part is actually a time range. So at the moment we are running in a COVID situation, that's no doubt. Once this is over, we will see definitely a consolidation on the marketplace. I know some people in the panel will say there will be no consolidation. Let's see. We will see a recession. This is very likely as the income, the world income is reduced. So that will have an effect. And once this period is over, we will again see an increasing need for sustainable mobility. These may, of course, overlap. In times of COVID, as I said, we see a massive push to digital, which really creates the fundament for new business models, which is going the direction of dynamic models, but which is also in the direction of being better connected to the touristic environment, but also between the modes. And if you look to the further future, a key solution is, of course, if you combine dynamic networks with autonomous. And I'll jump into more details on these items. Hannes, if you can please give it the next slide. Thank you. I think visibility actually is a key. And in bus, we haven't been across the globe necessarily very good in being very visible. And I think this is something that we are all about to change, which will be to our benefit. If we look at flights, very likely that the point-to-point business in flights will become much more important than the hub business. So this means direct flights, point-to-point, will be key in the future after they are allowed again in a broad way and after people are traveling again. And that, of course, gives a big opportunity for buses and trains to hop in, because actually these direct flights need to be feeded. And in many cases, it's much more efficient actually to feed a direct flight with a bus, excuse me, or a train, and then fly directly to the destination. So these opportunities are being built up, and they provide a lot of growth market for the future. Individual tourism has been on the growth since more than a decade, but it will surely rise stronger after COVID, and it will become more spontaneous. And if you look at the situation today, there's so much bus which connects different destinations, but quite often it's not really visible. In a sense, it's the glue that binds tourism together, but it's the invisible glue. And I think there will be much more of a visible share actually that can happen by bus. So bringing people to the beautiful destinations, bringing people to their vacation rentals. All of these things are done already, but not necessarily easy to combine. They are in many cases happening as part of a packaged service. But with individual tourism and also more domestic tourism, these will become more and more important. Actually, looking on the right side, if you look at the major travel aggregators or travel channels, you see that bus is not really visible there. So if you look at hotel pages, they mainly have rental car as ancillary revenue. If you look at airports, taxi, Uber, or driver shuttle services are much more represented than buses are. However, in many cases, bus is the much better way actually to access the city from an airport. But it's not really connected because the connectors aren't there at all places or aren't used. If you look at the attractions business, which was growing post-COVID a lot, that often redirects to guided tours, but not necessarily to individual bus trips. And if you look at vacation rentals, it's again the rental car that is more dominant. But bus is most often the best choice. So if we jump into that topic, and we will, the more we digitize, the more possibility we have actually to sell our product on a broader range. Next, please. The question is it a bus or is it a seat? I mean, bus means, in a sense, omnibus, traveling together. It's a vessel for many people, but is it really a vessel or is it a need that is there? So if I look at intercity bus today, of course, it's a bus that operates and brings people from one city to another city. But looking at concepts, or an airport bus is actually the same, bring people from an airport to a city. But if I look at certain concepts presented before, like with door to gate or others, that is partly expanded to the last mile. So basically, it's not necessarily anymore a bus city to city, but city to city plus. If I look at from the other side, why shouldn't taxi or shuttle companies or maybe a Uber bring people into larger vehicles? So these modes are in a sense merging. If I look at the charter business, and we see that on the event space, there are more and more companies that are offering grouped semi-regular lines actually to larger events like football games or other areas, which were before done mainly by pure charter business. So the businesses are merging there. If I look at rideshare as an example, which I heard recently in a panel is less hit by the pandemic as bus, I don't know, on a broad scale. But of course, there is a way of feeding actually major routes of train and bus through more capillary systems like ride sharing for smaller entities. Or you can broker seats, and Johannes in the pre-discussion of the panel said, yeah, that's what I tried years before, actually, brokering seats from charter businesses and getting people onto that. But maybe the interfaces were not there, the time wasn't there. But all of these segments are merging more and more together with the question is actually what the user is needing. It's not necessarily the vessel that is important, but what the user needs. And I think that's what we should focus on. So if you would say the satisfying the user need can be very simple, and that's my next slide, please, Hannes. It's very easy. A user wants to get from A to B, yeah, and find the offer easily. The blue bar is actually how I see the bus is supporting that offer. So finding offer easily, not necessarily always. At the right time, yes, there's a high frequency in bus offers on many routes. Maybe not high enough, but it's high. The right price, definitely. Bus is super there. It's the cheapest mode of transportation. The right comfort, that's arguable depending on the bus, but I think a lot of bus offers are very comfortable and they have also gained a lot in credibility, also in markets where there was a stigma before. And if you look at book and travel without hassle, I think there had been improvement, but maybe that hasn't been the strength of the business looking back, but it could be. So it sounds all super easy, but is it really that easy? Are we really there where we should be? So I think working on that will help a lot. And bringing that case to an edge case to the future is actually on my next slide, Hannes, please. it is where we can look into a game changer, and that of course goes a little bit further in the future. But today the problem in many routes is, especially if we are talking near city routes, to really replace private car, is that it is impossible to put enough supply on a route to actually create the demand that people really drop their car in any cases. It's just too costly to set up a route between a small village and a city that operates every 10 minutes. So the only way how to solve this is actually with on-demand type of solutions. And there are running a lot of solutions already in the market. So that's nothing that is new. This is, for example, here, one example from Australia from 2018. So a lot of these solutions are coming up and are growing. So that on-demand part. But now the second part is actually the size of the vehicle. In many cases, the size of the vehicle can't be 50 seats, but it has to be smaller. And if it's smaller, then you have to look at the costs of a driver. And if you look at the costs of a driver for a small vehicle, that gets a lot. And especially drivers can't wait in a depot for 5 hours until the peak hours of traffic are coming. So that actually is a big possibility for autonomous bus, where actually the cost of the driver is taken away. And if we look at this as something in the future, no, in Trondheim in Norway, this is on a test run operating since August this year in combination with on-demand business. So this is something that is happening now, and which will happen on a broader scale, I think much earlier than autonomous car. So that's something in the far future, but if this happens, I think there's a lot more growth potential than we could imagine. Why bus is a solution in general? I think there's no mode of transportation that is shared and that can transport as many people, which is as flexible as bus. Routes can be changed, buses can be set up to new places. Like any destination almost can be reached by bus. This is a lot of opportunity. And if you're looking at the need of sustainable mobility, bus has the best levels of basically solving pollution. It's the best CO2 efficient mode of transportation, takes least space. As said, is very flexible, so it can solve mobility within the cities, but of course also between the cities. And it is the cheapest mode of transportation. So that should give us a lot of hope for the future. And if we go to my next slide, and why is it relevant with some of these things happening more in the future to start with it right now? Because now we are setting the fundament to actually touch this additional business. And those who are setting the fundament right now, even in difficult times, they will profit from that. And digitalization could come also at relatively low investment. There are pay-as-you-earn solutions. I think most people in this virtual room and in the panel later, they have offerings that can help directly to grow business. Behavior changes are happening now. The shift to online is happening now. So if you're the more you're on the online side, the more business you make. And then, of course, looking at the opportunity to redefine business. So some companies, they redefined their network completely. Shared mobility will grow in general, and it's an opportunity right now actually to see how you can redefine your business processes and how you can redefine your business restarting or actually operating on this very difficult market. And the last point here is partnership. And I said partnership versus consolidation. I think consolidation will happen, but of course, partnership is a big option actually to create some virtual consolidation, to bring things together smartly, to work on same models, on new business models, and be successful together. And I think that's the other possibility compared to consolidation. So let's go into partnership. Let's take this as an opportunity for actually what would be a very good potential of bus in the future. And that's my last slide, Hannes. Bus will see a massive growth. I'm very confident, even though we are in very, very difficult times, everyone here. The challenge, of course, is to create the right fundament in difficult times. But I'm very sure that many of us will be able to master this challenge. That's it. Thanks.